there are many things churches can do to grow givers and giving in their church. Most churches are only doing a small handful of these things, and no church is doing all these things. So there are a couple of important worksheets I would like to go over with you. One is the PDF worksheet of best church generosity practices that I have learned from working with churches of all sizes over the years. The goal in the coming months is for your group to review this best practices list, determine what things you are already doing and things that you can possibly improve on doing, and also identify things on the list that you may want to consider doing in the future. Then have people volunteer, or you can assign specific people to do further research on these items. Then in future meetings, people can report back on their findings, and you can decide together if, when, and how to fit these things into your 12-month planning calendar. So let's take a look at the 12-month planning calendar and best practices together. While I'm going through the list, check anything you're currently doing or highlight any items you think would be worth looking into further. On this calendar, go ahead and check off items you are currently doing, then check off things you want to research and discuss further. The reason I have found the calendar is so important is that if you don't schedule it, it will never happen. Church life and leadership is all about working with the church calendar. If it doesn't get to the church calendar, then it's not real and it's just talk. But once you begin to put something on the calendar, you can then begin to massage it to fit with other things you're doing. By scheduling the best practices and resources you will use on a year-round basis, you will really begin to improve the financial health of your church, your people, and you'll begin to improve the culture of generosity where people are joyful, faithful, and excited about giving to the things that are happening in and through your congregation. As I mentioned earlier, no one does all the things on this list, but every church can choose the things that will work best for their church. So now let's take a look at the best practices worksheet. You will see each of the best practices listed and then website links to some of the best resources in America that can help with each best practice. So let's go through some of these best practices. On the list, you'll see worship services. Obviously, solid preaching by the pastor or guest speakers on biblical financial truths will be very helpful to your congregation. But it is just one of the many best practices on the page. For the pastor or guest speakers you might use, we have provided links to valuable biblical materials and illustrations that can be a great help in developing a financial or generosity sermon or series. Another item is to include a weekly generosity verse. This is a powerful tool to influence people's attitude and actions when it comes to their giving. In the links, we give you access to over 100 generosity verses. Most churches pray for the offering, but now you can actually have a verse on the screen or bulletin and then have a worship leader or a pastor or a lay leader read the verse and pray about what the verse says. So with the links provided, you can have 2 years of offering verses, and we even have a link to offering prayers for those who may want some help in exactly what to pray. This allows you to teach people about living generously by using the Bible without ever mentioning the church budget. Remember that the giving goal in your church is not to teach people to give to the budget, but rather to honor God with whatever He's given them. I've known many churches that have added this to their services, and they've seen some wonderful increases in their giving. Testimonies and teaching videos are things you can also show during the offertory. There are a great number of video resources you can check out on the Best Practices page. Making digital giving available in the worship service or at the end of the worship services is something many churches are beginning to do across the country. Some churches also still use giving envelopes. At the church where I pastored, our giving statements or special offering appeals always included a mail-in envelope that people could mail back or put in the offering plate. The use of a trusted financial or generosity guest speaker is also a best practice used by many churches. The next section touches on financial and generosity teaching materials. We have provided lots of links to valuable teaching resources you can use church-wide, in Sunday schools for all ages, in small groups, or by offering seminars and courses at your church. I have learned that if you really want to have an impact on your entire church and you really want to see giving patterns begin to change, review, select, and distribute one of the generosity devotionals we recommend. In addition to the one I have shared with you in this course, there are several others you have to choose from. This is a powerful way many churches have instructed and inspired people to begin to live more generously. Many churches have seen double-digit giving increases as their people grow in their faith and get excited about honoring the Lord with whatever He's entrusted to them. There's also a place to use generosity brochures and bulletin inserts and cartoons. One of the most important best practices any and every church should do will be to encourage legacy bequests. The next section has to do with donation, collections, and administration, where we give you links to check out online, electronic funds transfers, digital, app, and text giving. Increasing the ways people can give is the surest way to begin to see your giving increase. We live in a world where many people no longer carry much cash and where they write fewer and fewer checks. Many people no longer have checkbooks but only use a debit card. So it is important to allow people options to give online and digitally. While some churches are concerned about the small percentage fees for these services, the real cost is what happens if you don't provide these giving options. The real cost is the lost giving dollars you don't receive when you don't allow people to give electronically. Many people aren't in church every week, so they give very sporadically. But if you let them give online or digitally, their donations will come into your church whether they are in the building or not. Providing options for people to give assets or estate gifts will help you receive donations that will be worth 4, 5, and even 6 figures in the years to come. In this section, we also give you some helpful links to resources showing the value of sending out giving statements and materials more frequently, and ideas about acknowledging new gifts or larger and unexpected gifts. In one of the churches I served, we also developed an As God Provides project list that people could donate to every year. There are also some helpful resources for church treasurers and creating some financial policies in your church. The next section has to do with providing financial assistance and guidance in your church. Every church has 3 kinds of people in their congregation. Some people are struggling financially, some are stable, and some have a surplus. So every church needs to think through a strategy on how to effectively serve and minister to each group. Take time to check out some of the resources in this section. The last section is on different types of funding projects and campaigns. Here you'll find resources that can help encourage, empower, and equip you with ways to do an annual stewardship emphasis, a Bless Your Pastor Appreciation offering that the lay leaders in the church can organize, benevolence offerings, missions, building and renovation projects, a special year-end giving emphasis, and As God Provides projects. We also include ideas on how to bless your community with an outreach that can touch hundreds or even thousands of lives through your congregation. On these worksheets, hopefully you will notice a number of things that look interesting and inviting to the people in your group. What you want to do next is to choose several best practices that people can volunteer to research or that you can assign people to look into further by using the best practices worksheet PDF and the links, and then also put their initials by the planning calendar so you know who's going to do this work. Then in future meetings, they can bring back their findings to your group so you can decide which things you will want to plug into the calendar for the coming year or even beyond the coming year. As a team, prayerfully evaluate the best practices, proven resources, and the planning calendar to help you move forward in being able to grow joyful givers and increase giving in your church. In my own church, our leadership always found several things we would add each year. When our church leadership team started developing our 12-month church generosity calendar, we were doing less than 10 of the best practices, but within 3 or 4 years, we were scheduling more than 20 of the best practices every year. This allowed us to increase the joy that people had in our church about giving, and we were able to surpass our operating budget every year, along with having lots of extra resources to do a lot of As God Provides projects for our church, our ministries, our facilities, and our outreach and missions around the world. Thanks for allowing me to share this training session with you. May the Lord bless you and make you a blessing as you discuss and plan and work on these things together.